Writing used to look much different than it does today. If we look at some very early writing, you'll notice that the words are written in one large block of text. This text is called the scripto continua. There are no spaces between the words, there's no differentiation between capital letters and lowercase letters, and there's no punctuation. Why was writing like this? What in the world were people thinking? Well, long ago, if you can imagine, reading wasn't something done quietly by yourself like it is today. In fact, most people didn't know how to read. The purpose of reading back in ancient Greece and Rome was to read out loud. So a few people knew how to read and they would read out loud to others. Now check out this guy right here. His name was Aristophanes, and he created the earliest form of punctuation back in 200 BC. The system that he created used just 3 dots at different levels to communicate different lengths of pauses that readers should take as they read things out loud. This system stayed relatively the same for hundreds of years. And then, not to scare you with too many dates, but in 781 AD, things began to change as King Charlemagne and another guy, a monk named Alcuin, and I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. Poor Alcuin, I don't know how to pronounce that, so sorry if I'm doing it wrong. But the two of them started a school for monks. Now remember that regular old people did not know how to read. It was mostly the monks doing the reading. And in order to help the monks convey the ideas correctly as they read out loud, Alcuin started to introduce uniform spelling, spaces between words, capital letters at the beginnings of sentences, lowercase letters, and the formation of paragraphs. So way to go, Alcuin. Thank you for making writing easier to read. Things stayed like that for quite a while, and it was just the monks who learned these literary skills. And a huge part of that was because at that time, texts, pieces of writing, needed to be copied by hand if they wanted to have another copy of something. There was no ordering a book from Amazon. There were no copy machines. If you needed a copy, it was done by hand, a long, tedious task. All of this began to change when the printing press arrived on the scene back in the 1400s. The printing press was a machine that could make copies of texts or pictures so that copying didn't need to be done by hand. Now it was much easier to create printed material, and this mass production called for some standardization in punctuation. So where do we stand with this today? You might think that we would have complete standardization of punctuation rules. You would think that we could all agree on how to punctuate everything. And while that is often the case, there are also many times when authorities still disagree. That is one of the reasons why punctuation can be so difficult to learn. Different authorities have different rules, and in many cases, there's more than one way to punctuate something and have it be considered correct. Have you ever heard of a style guide? Different guides exist to show us how to punctuate things or style them. And different fields of study have different agreed upon rules. So, for instance, there is a style guide for journalists called News Style. There's a style guide for college level writing called Academic Style. There's one for scientists and educators and others called Science Style. And there's one more for general writing called Book Style. Now those are the 4 main style guides, and people writing in those fields need to follow the rules that align with their style guide. Just remember that consistency is key. Whenever you do have the freedom to choose between 2 ways that would both be considered correct, just make sure that you choose one and then follow that uniformly throughout your work.